Now we're going to begin with the temporal bone. This is probably one of the harder ones for students, mainly because some of the foramens. So we already talked about foramens are holes. So you can see we've got 3 holes that we're going to look at. There are many other holes in the base of your skull that are on the temporal bone, but these are the 3 that we're going to focus on. So these 3 holes, let's talk about what a process is. A process is something that is going to be protruding off of the bone so that muscles can attach. So we're going to look at some things that are protruding off where muscles would be attaching. And so these are going to be the 2 of our easier ones to find first. And then a meatus is like a canal. So this is your ear canal. You've got the external, and you can use auditory or acoustic, whichever you prefer, and meatus. So you can't say canal, so you can't say ear canal. You have to say a meatus. The difference between a meatus and a foramen is that the foramen is a hole where blood vessels and nerves go through. The meatus is a canal where other bones are located, so your inner ear bones are located there. So let's look at some of these processes, and then we'll dig into those foramens. So you might want to write some notes as we begin. So let's look at the skull here. So the first we're going to point out is the styloid process. So the styloid process, if you think of what a stylus is, it's something pokey. Do you see that right there? That's the styloid process. So that's the styloid process. And we'll learn what muscles will attach to that later. So this pokey thing. And do you see this large, looks like a chunk of meat there? That is, it's pretty massive, right? So that is the mastoid process. The mastoid process here. So you've got the styloid process, the mastoid process, and we're looking at the side of your head, so we're looking at that temporal bone. So right there is your ear canal, so that is our external auditory or acoustic, whichever you prefer, and then it is meatus. Alright, so we have our styloid process, our mastoid process, and our external, because it's the one on the outside. We'll look at the internal in a little bit, auditory meatus. And so then we've got this. This is the temporal bone, and there's the zygomatic bone, and this is the little archway that is connecting. This is called the zygomatic process. Zygomatic process here. It's like the archway that connects the temporal bone to your cheekbone. And then our last little thing that we can see right here is this is some cartilage that you're seeing here, and it's making like a looking like that. This is called a fossa, and this is where your mandible is going to connect. So this little piece here is called the mandibular fossa. Mandibular fossa. So we've got the styloid process, mastoid process, external auditory meatus, zygomatic process. So here I wanted to show you this. So there's the mandibular fossa. Can you see that your mandible is connecting in there? So that's important because this little piece here, which is the back part of your mandible, we'll do a video on the mandible, but this is called the mandibular condyle because it's connecting to another bone. So here is that zygomatic process. Here's that external auditory meatus. We have the styloid process, and here is that mastoid process. But I wanted to show you this look so you could see the mandible connected in there. And so there is a picture of the zygomatic process. So we can add to our picture here. So we can start right there. That is the external auditory or acoustic meatus because it's a ear canal. So you can see here this is the styloid process. getting real cluttered, aren't we? And this is the mastoid process. There. So I'm going to draw that cushion in there, and so that right there is the mandibular fossa. You might want to avoid that little, that's pointing to the temporal bone there. And then, whew, totally running out of place here. So right here, and you might want to, I don't know, color code it, but this little area right here is that zygomatic process. So maybe I can write on there. But it doesn't matter if you got that. Really running out of room here, so maybe yours looks prettier than mine. Okay, main thing is you know what it is. Zygomatic process, mandibular fossa, styloid process, external auditory meatus, and mastoid process. All right, we got those. So now let's dive into the foramens. That's what's hard, is the foramens. And so I don't know if you can see, I'm looking at the bottom here. And so I've got my finger on the mandibular fossa, that's that indention there. And staring at you here is poking up right there is the styloid process. So you've got the styloid process there. Erase there. So we've got the styloid process. And here is the mastoid process. And so when we get in lab together, I'm going to have you put your finger on the styloid process and a finger on the mastoid process, and I'm going to have you look between your fingers. There is a hole right there. The hole between the styloid process and the mastoid process is the stylomastoid foramen. Does that make sense? The stylomastoid foramen. Look on your things to study, you'll see it. All right, so that's one of our three foramens right there. It's the hole right in between the styloid process and the mastoid process. Remember, foramens are for certain nerves and blood vessels and things to go through. All right, while I'm right here at that styloid process, I'm looking at the underside of the skull here. Do you see this? Now we got a huge hole over here. That's the foramen magnum, and there's the occipital condyle. So right here beside those occipital condyles, there's a second large hole there. And so that second large hole is the jugular foramen. And you've got another one over here. Do you see it over there? Okay, you got them on both sides because you have your jugular vein that has to go through there. You do have some other things that go through that, but that is your jugular foramen. It is the larger hole right there by the styloid process. All right, so just right above that, right here again by that styloid process, we have that larger hole. There is a smaller hole. Our new models don't have it, but our older models do, and I will use the older model here in a moment. I'm going to run some pipe cleaners through it. But this is the carotid foramen. Your carotid artery, smaller. You do have one on the other side, right there. Okay, so the newer models just have an indention, but there really is a hole through there. It actually kind of hard to run the pipe cleaner, but we will look at that in lab. So the smaller one is the carotid foramen. This larger one is the jugular foramen. So let's look here. This is one of the old models, and so here, I don't know if you can see, but that's the styloid process. Here's the mastoid process, and there is the tiny hole right there. You can't see the stylomastoid foramen. This bottom one, usually I've used different colors, but the bottom one here is going through the jugular foramen, and this top one is going through the carotid foramen. So here is the jugular, and right here is the carotid on that side. So we'll practice looking at that. So those are our three holes that we're going to do: jugular foramen, carotid foramen, and the one that's in between the styloid process and the mastoid process, that is the stylomastoid foramen. So those are our foramens. We do have one, we have another meatus to look at. And so let me move forward. So I've got that pipe cleaner still going through, same pipe cleaner. So now I'm looking inside of the skull. So I want you to see, this is that sphenoid bone. Can you see the bird? There's a sphenoid bone. So this bottom one is going through the jugular foramen. So if I flip back over, you would see it's that same larger hole. And this top one here is the carotid foramen. It's kind of like in the bottom of that bird. So I'm going to make you see right here, this little hole is what we're going to be looking at in just a second. So we've got the carotid, we've got the jugular, and there is this one here again, so we know what that big one is right there. So my probe is pointing through the jugular. You can't see the other one on the other side. This is the hole I'm heading to, but this is jugular. Here's that large hole. There's another medium hole. Also still another view. I took a few snapshots of me having the probe through the jugular. And so now there's the jugular right there. Right in through there's jugular, and up here I don't have a pipe through it anymore, but is the carotid. But this is the one I want to bring your attention to. So if I were to turn this on the side and look over here on the side is the external auditory meatus. If I drew a straight line almost where that peg is through that, you would notice that the external would lead straight to this. This is the internal auditory meatus. This is where it comes out on the other side to your brain. Now your bones of your ear are inside there. So the reason it's not a foramen because it doesn't go all the way through. But so we do have entrance into the ear canal. We run into those three bones, and then this is where internally it would be connecting to where your brain and stuff was. So we have again the jugular foramen, the internal auditory meatus. It's not a foramen because it doesn't go all the way through, and up here you can't see it from this angle is where the carotid foramen would be. So I know that's a lot, but with practice you guys can do that. So we really need to look at those in lab.